Alrighty. So, hello. How are you this wonderful night?
Yeah, forgive me, dear. I was in another meeting there, and it just didn't want to end, so I had to end it.
Oh,
Um, yeah, so forgive me. I promised you I'd be here.
no, it's okay. If you've got other stuff to do, I record it, so I can always
Well,
watch it later.
yeah, well, I know that, but I told you I'd participate with you, and I'm not going to leave my word.
Oh, thanks.
I don't want you feeling alone.
Ah, Well, I put a lot of work into this PowerPoint, so I was like, screw it. Even if I'm doing it by myself, I'm gonna
Now,
go through it all.
I did read the chapter 3 while I was donating blood.
Oh.
ran out of time. Didn't get to 4, so forgive me. I've been busy.
No, that's quite all right. I too have been busy and barely just finished this today, so. All right. Well, since you read 3 before, do you want to read that one?
Yeah, let me pull it up real quick, okay, dear? I'm on my phone. I'm nowhere near a Bible, but I've got it on my phone. Let's see here. Oh, right there. Right where I left it. Okay. Let me know when you're ready.
You go for it.
All right. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, made an image of gold, whose height was 3 cubits, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. Interesting. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together the princes, the governors, and the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then the princes, the governors and captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together unto the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up, and they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then an herald cried aloud, to you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Therefore, at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshipped the gold image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Wherefore, at that time, certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. They spake and said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee, they serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego? Do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Now if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, I know it's a lot of stuff, huh? And
He's repeating.
and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made. Well, but if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is at that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us. Oops, dang it. Let's see, where am I?
16.
Yep, 17. Deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. But if not, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego.
Abed-nego.
Abednego, okay. Sounds like a dim-dum.
The way I remember it is my dad always used to say, okay, time to get into Shadrach, Meshach, and into bed you go.
I'll remember that one. Therefore, sorry. Therefore, he spake and commanded that they shall heat the furnace 17 times more than it was wont to be hated or heated. Dang Shakespearean language. And he commanded mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Sister Dawn.
Abed-nego.
You go, thank you. And to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. I feel like I'm reading a bedtime story.
I know.
Then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, and their hats, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because of the king's commandment was urgent, and the furnace exceeding hot, the flame of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Got it. And these three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound onto the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, was astonished and rose up in haste.
Right.
Huh?
Never mind. That's me being bad. Never mind. And
Okay.
rose up.
Right. Unto his counselors, did not we cast three men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, true, O king. He answered and said, lo, I see four men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt, and the form of the fourth is like the Son of God. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace, and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Sounds like my mother. Come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire. And the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors being gathered together, saw these men upon bodies the fire had no power, nor was in the hair of their head singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word, and yielded their bodies that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there's no other God that can deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon.
That is a mouthful.
Sure is. Feel like I was in theater arts.
Right? Shakespearean play.
All right. Oh, hither.
Okay, so I'm gonna break it on down. So Nebi, as I like to call him, King Neb, ordered an image of himself to be made in gold that was about 40 feet tall and about 8 feet wide, because evidently he did not learn from his previous dream of the statue being crushed into a million pieces. And then he made all his Babylonian staff and everybody come to the image dedication. And then he told all of his people, okay, yo guys, you're gonna bow and worship when you hear the music get down and start playing. And if you're not going to worship it, then we're going to chuck you in the fire. So, Shadrach, Meschak, and Abed-nego and Daniel were all promoted from the previous dream. So these Chaldeans were very jealous of them. And they were looking for any infraction to be able to tell on these boys and get them into trouble with the king. So they basically ran and snitched to the king that these boys were not bowing to the king's decree. So my question was, when I was thinking about this, I'm like, okay, well, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego were not the only Jews there. First of all, remember, they kidnapped all of the Jews from the previous Judean king. And remember, he brought all of the smartest and well-trained and the biggest and strongest of the boys in the court of the Judean court and brought them over to King Neb's palace to train them up. So did this mean that the other Jews did not also bowed, and these three boys were the only ones that didn't bow? Also, it doesn't say anything about Daniel being there, and so I did some digging on that, and the consensus is that they believed that the king had probably sent Daniel out on some type of errand or something to handle some type of task for the king. We know he couldn't have been there because of the fact that Daniel too would not have bowed, because later on we see he gets chucked in the lion's den for not worshiping one of I think the sun or something like that. Or no, maybe it was King Nebuchadnezzar. I can't remember why he gets thrown in the lion's den, but he is thrown in there later. So he didn't put saving his own life above his obedience to God. So we can assume he wasn't in Babylon at the time of this worship session. And okay, so I'm wondering, okay, what happened to the other Jewish boys? Did they not bow too, or did they bow? And if they didn't bow, was it just that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego were being targeted specifically? They didn't care about the other Jewish boys because they didn't have a whole bunch of stuff that the Chaldeans wanted. So was it just that they were trying to get something on these three boys, or did the other Jewish boys bow? So that's something that the Bible doesn't mention. But when the boys were brought to the king, of course, he asks if the accusations were true, and that if they were ignoring the decree to worship the golden image and all the other Babylonian gods as well. And when he asked, who is it that God shall deliver you out of my hands? Could he have meant that if you don't worship me or my gods, then I will indeed kill you? So which God is it you serve that you believe he could get you out of this mess? So, oh crap. I admit, I didn't see that person up there. Hey, Justin. So let's see. So the next image. So yeah, so these boys here are saying, oh, heck no, I won't bow. And then the king is basically talking to him. So I think it's in, what verse is it? There are certain Jews whom thou hast, no, that's not it. We'll be able to deliver.
I believe it's 14, dear. Right around 14.
Is it? Okay. Yeah, so he's not only saying you're not bowing down to my golden image, you're also not serving my gods as well. And now if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound, blah, 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 blah. If ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into fiery furnace. And who is it that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? So again, he puts himself in this position above God. We see all through like these chapters where he's kind of like the Jews were in the book Judges. He doesn't really learn his lesson. Like in the midst of all of the fanfare of the magicalness of the miracles that are happening, he's like, oh, wow, yeah, your God's great. Oh my gosh, yeah. And then 2 seconds later, he forgets and he's like, no, I'm greater. And so he's basically saying, hey, which God do you serve that you think that he's going to save you from me? Like, I'm the one who you should be afraid of. And so, who is this God? And we know from previous that Nebuchadnezzar actually said, yeah, your God is great. Your God's greater than all my gods. But now he's back to, no, my gods are greater and I'm greater. So pride is a huge thing with King Nebuchadnezzar. It gets him into a lot of trouble. So the boys responded telling him that they don't care if the answer gets them killed because their God, Allah, will deliver them out from both Nebuchadnezzar's wrath and the fiery furnace. And if God doesn't deliver them, at least they can say that they died obeying God instead of obeying man. So it's one of these things that in the Lord's Prayer, it says, thine will be done, not my will. And so we put our faith and trust that he will, heal us, or he will get us out of some kind of trouble. But we also have to say to ourselves, okay, but if I'm to go through this trial, if I'm to go through this fire, and God doesn't heal me or doesn't get me out of this predicament, then I will accept my fate, because I'm going to fully trust in him that he'll be with me through it all. So, okay, so, and this is a classic example from what Paul says, I think in Philippians something or other. To live is Christ, to die is gain. So to live, you live for Christ, and to die, the only thing that you're going to do is gain seeing Christ. And then what Jesus says in Matthew about how or I think it's John, how he that finds his life shall lose it, and he that loses his life for my sake shall find it. Meaning, don't put your life above your dedication to God. Because if you try to save your fanny and turn your back on God, then when you die, you basically are going to go in the fiery place for eternity. So they basically told the king that they feared God more than they feared him, which pissed Nebuchadnezzar off. And then it pissed him off so much that he commanded that the fire be heated 7 times hotter than it normally is. And it's interesting, 7 is a major number in the Bible. So you see 7 times hotter here, right? That's going to come up later. So the king ordered his strongest men in his army to bind the boys up and cast them in the furnace, right? Which is kind of funny because, well, it's funny to us, sad for the men in his army that cast him in there, because the fire was so hot that his biggest and strongest men were ordered to throw them in, and they themselves burnt up, like fried, because the flames were so intense and so hot that they actually burnt to death. But of course, the boys did not. And then the king was watching from above and then saw that there were 4 men walking around. And it's interesting, he described one of the men as the Son of God. So they say it could have been Jesus Christ or it could have been an angel. But it's interesting. I need to find out the Hebrew word, like what was the translation. What exactly did he say? Did he say Son of God, or did he say something else? So then the king ran down to the entrance and shouted for the boys to come out. Another miracle that he sees. And he calls them out, and he recognizes them as, again, servants of the Most High God. So when they came forth, they came out completely unsinged, no smell of fire on them, not a hair was burnt, as if they had never been thrown in. And then finally, the king understood the power of their God and commanded that everyone in Babylon worship these boys' God, the God of Israel, and that if they were caught worshiping another, that they would be killed and their houses would be turned into a sewer site, which is a dunghill. And I mean, these poor Chaldeans, they basically want to take out Shadrach, Meshach, and Abed-nego and gain control over their provinces. But what ends up happening is it ends up completely biting them in the ass. And the boys were given even more power and more control. And these Chaldeans were now forced to worship the God of Israel, the God that they hated. And if they didn't, then they were going to be slain. So it literally boomeranged. What they wanted to happen to the boys boomeranged right back at them. Okay. So chapter 4. All right. I'll read chapter 4. So it said, Nebuchadnezzar the king, unto all people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. I thought it good to show the signs and wonders that the high God hath wrought toward me. How great are his signs, and how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his domain is from generation to generation. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in mine house and flourishing at my palace. I saw a dream which made me afraid, and the thoughts upon my bed and the visions of my head troubled me. And therefore made I a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known unto me the interpretation of the dream. Then came in the magicians. Sorry, hang on. All right, go. Oi, it's like a 3-alarm fire over here. Then came in the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers. And I told the dream before them, but they did not make known unto me the interpretation thereof. But at the last, Daniel came in before me, whose name was Belshazzar, according to the name of my God, and in whom is the spirit of the holy gods. And before him, I told the dream. Okay, so I'm going to stop here. So first off, there's a couple of things I want to point out. First, so Nebuchadnezzar's name means Nebo, protect the crown. And Nebo was a Babylonian, Assyrian pantheon god. And legend had it that he was the son of Marduk, which is the middle guy that you see in this PowerPoint. And Marduk was like bull calf of the sun god Uta or Utu, and a tutelary deity. He was considered a patron god of scribal art and human learning. Marduk was associated with the divine weapon Imhulu, a divine wind weapon used by the sun god Marduk to savage the war goddess Tamat. He is associated with the planet Jupiter. And then there was also a Mount Nebo where Moses viewed the promised land, and then he died on it. And it was thought that it was on that mountain that Satan and the archangel Michael fought over the body of Moses on Mount Nebo. So Belshazzar, which is Daniel's new name, Daniel's Babylonian name, means Lord of the straitened treasure, and Bel, protect the king. Bel is a title signifying Lord or Master, and applied to various gods in Mesopotamian religions. Bel and Marduk, which is basically Bel and the dragon, as you see all the way over on the right hand side, tended to be one and the same. And Bel, B-E-L, also is a form of Baal, B-A-A-L. And Daniel was renamed by the king after a famous Babylonian deified prophet called Bel, who could basically deliver oracles and prophecy. So when Daniel was able to interpret that dream, he gave him this name. In Isaiah 46:1 says, Bel boweth down, Nebo stoopeth. Their idols were upon the beast and upon the cattle. Your carriages were heavy loaden. They are a burden to the weary beast. So these are kind of the gods of Babylonian times during the reign of Nebuchadnezzar. So his second dream that he has, I find this very interesting. Like when I first read it, I was like, oh my gosh, here he goes again, like puffing up Daniel's God, like saying, oh, he's so great, he's so wonderful, he's so everlasting, he's got this everlasting kingdom, and his domain is from generation to generation, and he's so mighty and wondrous. He's like buttering up Daniel to get him to interpret his second dream. And he says this, but then does he go to Daniel right away? No. He goes to his own gods, his own magicians, his own astrologers, his own Chaldeans and soothsayers first, because he remembers this dream. And he's like, guys, I remember this dream. Now tell me what it is. And of course they can't. They have no idea the interpretation of it. So now he's forced to come back to Daniel and say all this. So it's almost like he doesn't really mean what he is saying. He's kind of like either that or he's just kind of a in the moment type of guy where, when you're in trouble, you call on God and you're like, oh, you're so great and powerful and wonderful. Can you get me out of this mess? Okay, once you got me out of this mess, out of sight, out of mind. Bye. He kind of reminds me of that type of person. So let's see. So I said, because of the miracles the king had witnessed thus far and is in need of another miracle, the king makes known the following things to Daniel. He acknowledges his God to be the high God, the supreme, most high God. This shows that he is still worshiping lower G gods, but recognizes God as the God, the big G God above all little G gods. He confesses that God's miracles and wonders are mighty and great compared to his gods. He also confesses that the God of Israel has complete sovereignty over the earth, his kingdom, and that his rule or dominion, his sovereignty over the realm is forever, from the beginning of time to the end of time, into perpetuity. And then King Nebuchadnezzar had another troubling dream. And interestingly enough, he does not call Daniel right away. He first goes to his magicians and soothsayers to see if they can interpret his dream, but they cannot. Then he calls Daniel and asks him, and I'm paraphrasing this, he's saying, hey, so I know you're my wisest and most knowledgeable interpreter that I have on retainer. And I know that your holy God is greater than my gods. And yes, knowing all this, I still went to my guys first because I actually remembered my dream this time, but they totally suck and couldn't interpret it. So be a dear and tell me what my dream means, because I know you got this. So that's basically the street version of what he's saying. So he says, "O Belshazzar, master of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in thee, and no secret troubleth thee, tell me the visions of my dream that I have seen and the interpretation thereof. Thus were the visions of mine head in my bed. I saw, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and the height thereof was great. The tree grew and was strong, and the height thereof reached unto heaven, and the sight thereof to the end of all the earth. The leaves thereof were fair, and the fruit thereof much. And it was meat for all. The beasts of the field had shadow under it, and the fowls of the heaven dwelt in the burrs, there's no R in there, bores thereof, and all flesh was fed of it. I saw in the visions of my head upon my bed, and behold, a watcher and an holy one came down from heaven. He cried aloud and said thus, hew down the tree and cut off his branches, shake off his leaves and scatter his fruit. Let the beast, shoot, sorry, I lost my place. Okay, let me just start over. Nevertheless, cried aloud and said thus, hew down the tree and cut off his branches, shake off his leaves and scatter his fruit. Let the beasts get away from under it, and the fowls from his branches. Nevertheless, leave the stump of his roots in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass in the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts in the grass of the earth. Let his heart be changed from man's, and let a beast's heart be given unto him, and let 7 times pass over him. This matter is by the decree of the watchers, and the demand by the word of the holy ones, to the intent that the living may know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will, and setteth up over it the basest of men. This dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Now thou, O Belshazzar, declare the interpretation thereof, for as much as all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known unto me the interpretation, but thou art able, for the spirit of the holy gods is in thee. Then Daniel, whose name was Belshazzar, was astonied for 1 hour. I keep wanting to say astonished, because it means the same thing. For 1 hour, or no, astoned means silent, I think. And his thoughts troubled him. The king spake and said, Belshazzar, let not the dream or the interpretation thereof trouble thee. Belshazzar answered and said, My lord, the dream be to them that hate thee, and the interpretation thereof to thine enemies. So I was confused. I was like, what does that mean? So I looked it up a little bit more, and basically what he's saying is, my lord, I really don't want to tell you this dream because it's not good news, and I wish this was for your enemies instead of for you. So he says, the tree that sawest, which grew and was strong, whose height reached unto the heaven, and the sight thereof to all the earth, those leaves were fair, and the fruit thereof much, and in it was meat for all, under which the beasts of the field dwelt, and upon whose branches the fowls of the heaven had their habitation. It is thou, O king, that art grown and become strong, for thy greatness is grown and reacheth unto heaven, and thy domain to the end of the earth. And whereas the king saw a watcher and a holy one coming down from heaven, and saying, hew the tree down and destroy it, yet leave the stump of the roots thereof in the earth, even with a band of iron and brass, in the tender grass of the field, and let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let his portion be with the beasts of the field till 7 times pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which is come upon my lord, the king, that they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they shall make thee to eat grass as oxen, and they shall wet thee with the dew of the heaven, and 7 times shall pass over thee, till thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomsoever he will. And whereas they commanded to leave the stump of the tree roots, thy kingdom shall be sure unto thee. After that thou shalt have known that the heavens do rule. Wherefore ever, O king, let my counsel be acceptable unto thee, and break off thy sins by righteousness, and thine iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, if it may be a lengthening of thy tranquility. So let's break this down. So he has a dream of a very tall tree. And I don't know if you saw this one. So this thing in the middle, that picture, they actually think that that was a petrified tree. I think it's called the Devil's Cauldron or Devil's something or other. But they believe it was a tree from pre-flood that was cut down. So it was like ginormous, and the leaves and the branches like covered an immense amount of the earth. And it had a lot of fruit. It was bearing fruit and all this kind of stuff. It was in the center of the earth, and it grew strong to such heights that it even reached the heavens. And the leaves were plentiful. The tree had plenty of fruit to feed animals and humans, and the animals of the field had plenty of shade to escape the heat of the sun. All the birds were able to nest in its branches. Then a watcher and holy one came down from heaven and appeared to him, crying out, chop down the tree, cut off the branches, shake off the leaves, scatter the fruit, so that the animals and birds flee from the tree. Leave the stump of the tree and the roots intact. So the king the tree is the king. And then what's going to happen is God's going to chop off his mightiness. And he will be, so the tree stump signifies the tree will be bound or imprisoned with iron, which is the strongest metal, and copper brass, which is the second strongest metal. This stump will be surrounded by a grassy field. The dew of heaven will cover the field. His station will be with the beasts in the grass. So he's saying you're basically going to lose your kingdom, and you're going to go mad, honestly. Says his heart shall be changed from a man's heart to a beast's heart. 7 times shall pass against him. And it's interesting that he wanted the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter. And now he is basically going to go mad for 7 years. So the Watcher and the Holy One then decreed these things will happen to prove to men that the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is the most high God, and it is he who gives power to men and can just as easily take it away and give it to the lowest of men's. That lineage nor riches have anything to do with it, that God was the one who allowed Nebuchadnezzar to rule, and God can take it away.
Yeah, and Don, I got something for you. I sent you something to Telegram that I have had for some time, and it's regarding the 8 principles of restitution. Now, it's got the Old Testament stuff in there, but it talks about 7 times. I need to pull up real quick. I'll show you. I sent it to you. Telegram, 8 principles. 1 second here, dear. Right here. It says Leviticus. Dang it. Leviticus 26:18, it says, and after all this, if you do not obey me, then I will punish you 7 times more for your sins. So thought I'd share that with you.
Yep. He always does things in 7s. So after hearing the king's dream, Daniel went away for about an hour and returned looking very troubled. The king told him, hey, don't worry over the interpretation. They just wanted to know what it meant, even if it was bad news. And Daniel was very close to the king. He respected him, and he was like the main dude that you had to go through to get to the king. So he was very close in a working relationship, but also in a friendship with the king. And so he would rather wish that the message within the dream was for the king's adversaries and enemies rather than for the king himself, which is what he was saying there. So now I'm gonna continue. So the tree that wait, did I already read all that? The tree that thou sawest, which was great and strong, who said, yeah, I think I did. Okay. Wherefore, O king, let my counsel be acceptable unto thee. Break off thy sins by righteousness and thine iniquities by showing mercy to the poor, if it may be a lengthening of thy tranquility. Okay, so the interpretation of the dream goes like this. The tree, leaves, and fruit represents King Nebuchadnezzar's greatness. The height and width of the tree represents his greatness being known throughout the earth and even in the heavens itself. The Watcher and the Holy One represents God's decree and judgment over Nebuchadnezzar, and that the king will lose his rule over his kingdom and be driven out from amongst men. So Nebi will succumb to madness, believing himself to be a beast of the field, where he will end up eating like a beast, acting like a beast, like an oxen specifically. And he will basically go mad for 7 years until he comes to realize that God is the only God to be worshipped among men, because our God is a jealous God. In the meantime, God will give Neb's rule over to whoever he chooses. And after this period of time, the king will finally come to realize that it is the heavens that rule over man and not the king. That which is given can be taken from us very easily. Neb was getting too big for his britches, so God thought to teach him a lesson. But God is a very patient God. He doesn't do this right away. He gives people fair warning about what is to come if they don't change their ways. So Daniel told him, pleaded with him to stop sinning, that and stop worshiping other gods, that Daniel's God is the only God to worship, and to kind of make up for all of his sinning and selfishness and pride and stuff, that he should do something for someone else. And one of the things in the New Testament that they talk about a lot is, feeding the poor, helping the widows and the orphans. And so Daniel suggests, hey, well, why don't you take some of these riches and help your people who are struggling in poverty? And that if he made an attempt to turn away from his sins, that God would bless him and lengthen his rule over his people. Otherwise, God would judge him and take everything away that he had given him. So all this came upon the king Nebuchadnezzar. We're on chapter 4, verse 29. At the end of 12 months, so he had 12 months to get his act together, he walked into the palace of the kingdom of Babylon. The king spake and said, is not this great Babylon that I have built for the house of the kingdom by the might of my power and for the honor of my majesty? And while the word was in the king's mouth, there fell a voice from heaven saying, O King Nebuchadnezzar, to thee it is spoken, the kingdom is departed from thee. And they shall drive thee from men, and thy dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. They shall make thee to eat grass as oxen, and 7 times shall pass over thee, until thou know that the Most High ruleth in the kingdom of men, and giveth it to whomever he will. The same hour was the thing fulfilled upon Nebuchadnezzar, and he was driven from men, and did eat grass as oxen, and his body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hairs were grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like birds' claws. And at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted up mine eyes unto heaven, and mine understanding returned to me. And I blessed the Most High, and I praised and honored him that liveth forever, whose domain is an everlasting domain, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. And all the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing. And he doth according to his will in the army of heaven, and among the inhabitants of the earth, and none can stay his hand or say unto him, what doth thou? At the time my reason returned unto me, and for the glory of my kingdom, mine honor and brightness returned unto me, and my counselors and my lords sought unto me, and I was established in my kingdom, and excellent majesty was added unto me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all whose works are truth, and his ways judgment, and those that walk in pride he is able to abase. So basically, unfortunately for the king, he soon forgot Daniel's warning. He continued in his sin, worshiping his pagan gods and building up his wealth at the cost of his own people. And God gave Nebuchadnezzar 12 months to change his ways, but he didn't. He was stubborn. Not only that, but the king started to put himself on a pedestal. One day, while overlooking his vast kingdom, he began to speak about how grandiose his kingdom of Babylon was because of what he did, not because of what God did, but because of what he did, in stating it was all due to his own power and might rather than God's might and power. And then Neb, of course, heard the voice repeating the interpretation Daniel had given him not 12 months prior about being driven out to Babylon to feed with the oxen and field for 7 years. And of course, that same hour, he went completely bonkers, went out into the fields, became like this homeless recluse, and was sleeping and eating with the beasts in the field. And he was dirty, long, tangly hair, nails with like bird talons. But thankfully, after that 7-year period, the king's senses were restored, and he realized how massively powerful God was. And he began to bless him and praise and worship the Most High as the God of all gods, whose domain was everlasting and all encompassing. So he finally got it. It clicked in his head that all these things, like he had said this time and time and time before, but he kept screwing up. But thankfully, our God is patient, our God is loving, and he keeps giving us chance after chance to redeem ourselves. So, before, I don't think he really even truly believed it. And this time his heart and mind were sincerely changed, and he turned from his sin to worship the God of Israel. That, and that's the instant that God restored everything to him. And increased, he didn't even just restore it, he increased his majesty, and blessed him in wealth and power. And from that moment on, King Nebuchadnezzar praised and extolled and worshiped the King of Heaven, was amazed at God's truth and judgment. And he had a very healthy respect for God now. And Nebuchadnezzar finally learned his lesson about pride, and how if a man allows pride to overtake their heart, to beware, because God knows how to humble a man very quickly. But we see later on, when Daniel gets thrown into the lion's den, even though King Nebuchadnezzar realizes that God is the God, the only God to be worshipped, he still hangs out with the same people, his dark powered friends. He still has them counseling him. And so it's kind of like us when we hang out with the world, when we accept God into our hearts and make a change, but we're still trying to be in the world. And we're still trying to be of the world. We are to be in the world, but not of it. And so, there's a fine line you've got to have. You can't still go out partying with your friends. You can't still have these really, intimate relationships with the world, because the world will trick you. The world will confuse you. The world will get you to compromise. And so that's what ends up happening to him later on, because the Chaldeans trick him into doing something that he realizes his mistake, but he had already decreed something, and which got Daniel to be put into the lion's den. But that's for a later time. But I just find it fascinating that, this here kind of revolves around us, and when we are far away from God and putting ourselves in the midst of a sinful world, how easily we can be deceived, how easily we can go from, oh God, you're so great, to who? What God? Who do you worship again? It's like we're easily duped, we're easily deceived. And so we always have to be on our guard. And poor Nebuchadnezzar fell into that over and over and over again, until God really showed him his might and power and basically made him go mad. and act like an idiot for 7 years, and then finally said, okay, have you learned your lesson, Nebuchadnezzar? Because if you have, I'm going to give everything back to you. So, yeah. Anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I got one for you. Would you perhaps agree that maybe I'll give you a great example of my own endeavors. I'm already employed, okay, with one place, okay, and I provided that W-4 and all that good, stuff, put exams, all that stuff. But then I was offered another job. I work at 2 jobs now, but the second job never asked me for a W-4, never asked me for an I-9. It's kind of like because they got to know me, kind of thing. Because I was shoveling snow on top of their roof. Now they asked me to do something else. I get paid $25 an hour to drive a forklift around. Do you think God's opening this other door for myself? And perhaps maybe the other one could be closing soon? Something like when one door closes, another one opens.
With these kinds of dilemmas where, you're kind of feeling as though you don't know which one to turn to, I mean, that's the perfect time to basically to pray about it and say, okay, God, like if I'm supposed to work 2 jobs, let it work out, let it work itself out. If I'm supposed to just work one job over another, then completely close this door and open the other one. I'm just here for the ride. I want you to decide because you can see the future, everything, what's going to happen. I don't. I'm at a disadvantage, so I'm going to trust in you that you will lead me down the right path, even if it's a scary path. But make it very obvious to me that this is the path you want me to go on. Um,
It's wonderful you say that, dear, because the first job here at the interview, it's such a childish question, if you ask me, or such an amateurish question. But the operations manager who interviewed me at this my main one, she was, Robert, where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years? I started laughing. I was like, let's leave that up to God because I'm not a fortune teller. She was like, well, I didn't know I was going to be here 5 years ago. I mean, come on now, what kind of question is that? So, yeah, but they're impressed with that question, and like I said, like you said, that's what I've been doing. I think you've come to know me, don't you?
obedience, yeah, obedience is the most important thing. And like, for
Pa-
me in my
Patient.
work, like,
Yeah.
because I'm laid off, I decided to go full tilt, like after this whole COVID stuff happened and they were forcing me to declare my faith and all of this kind of stuff. I was just like, okay, you know what? I'm going full tilt now. The next job that I have, they're going to know everything. I'm not hiding anything. So what I did is my resume is on LinkedIn. And, it's just like Facebook where you can put like a little header picture and then you can put your little photo and then you have all of your skills and whatnot. And I put a Bible verse up there. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to put it out there because they're going to know. I don't want any kind of hidden secrets at all. I want you to know what you're getting yourself into if you hire me. And then I'm trusting God because most companies, I'd say about 80% of the companies are going to look at that and go, oh, no, that's true. That's trouble. So.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Derek. When I did that final letter notice to Edward Decker, thanks to private man, he gave me one sound word, and from there I just took it from there, and I put the Lord's Prayer at the very top of that letter. So we'll see what happens. I sent it out this last Monday. So finally, I took some we call it some adjustments in that letter. Thanks, like I said, once again, thanks and a true applauding to my brother there in Connecticut. Private nobody. I won't divulge his name if he doesn't want to, but anyways. But yeah, So just that one word. And then I also found it in Matthew 18:15. If your adversary is to trespass upon you, make it known. So yeah. Then I already had that scripture in there. I just forgot all about it. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely going full tilt with the obedience factor, because I believe that we're coming into some pretty hard times that are up and coming to happen. And so I want to make sure that I'm being obedient, and I'm trusting him 100%. I'm not trusting in myself. I'm not going to worry about anything, because it says worry about nothing, for, God's got our backs. So we don't have the spirit of fear. And there's a reason for that, because fear induces panic, and panic induces irrational decisions.
Yep. I've been there.
Yeah. So, we can
Yeah.
we can all take a lesson from old King Neb, and
Don't
not
worry.
just fall on God when you're in trouble. Like,
Yep.
obedience is every day, and we will screw up. I've been screwing up, and I haven't been diligent with my Bible studies in the morning and stuff like that. And especially I haven't been diligent with my prayer life, which I really need to ratchet up. But I'm trying, and that's really all God wants, is just for us to attempt perfection. He doesn't expect us to get to perfection, but we're supposed to attempt it.
And to be humiliated, well, I mean, just to be
Humble.
yeah, exactly. And I'll be the first to sit there and tell you that, there's been quite a bit of times I've humiliated myself. And there's a lot of times I made that phone call to God, and I always get that one angel. I said, God, talk to God. Well, I have to put you on hold, or we'll call you back. Dang it. I got that angel. You're 54 in line.
Right.
You know me. But no, I'm right there with you, dear. I'm right there with you. Like I said, I promised you, and I gave you my word that from here on out, I'd be with you here in your
Aw.
Bible studies. It's helping me.
Well, I enjoy your company, and thank you very much. And thanks, Justin, for participating for a quick sec.
Yeah. Hey, go ahead, Justin. Sorry, I don't want to cut you off. Justin, go ahead.
I can't hear you.
Hey, Justin, blink twice if you can hear us. Sorry.
I don't know if he's trying to unmute.
He is. He's trying to unmute, but there's no sound coming out. Poor guy.
Aw.
Do you have a chat?
What about now? Is that better?
There it is.
There you
There
go.
you are, baby.
I had the security thing on my phone. I forgot about that. I had to turn it off. For the mic to work. No, I was just saying I always enjoy a little Bible time. So that was I like that.
Oh, good. Well, make sure that you come on the other channel, the God's Full Armor channel, because that's where all the Zoom links and reminders are over there. But
Yeah, I'll jump on there.
yeah, I sent a quick link to everybody on the national channel. So yay, Justin came. And I was like, is that the Justin?
Am I the Justin now?
All right, I'm gonna stop recording.